G'day folks, and welcome to Gormo's Shed. Well, this week we've got some more handy hints for you, and I've got two, possibly three that I might cover this time. So what we'll do is make our way out into the shed, and we'll have a look at what we've got in store for you. So we'll go out there now. Right folks, our first tip today is to do with painting. Now when I say painting, I'm only talking about acrylic paints here, and in a modelling sense I'm talking about artists' acrylics. I haven't done this particular thing with enamel paints. It probably would work, I don't know, but for this purposes of this demo we're talking about acrylic paints. Now the way I got onto this tip was firstly with acrylic house paints. Now I used to do a bit of painting some time back. I was running a handyman service, and that was one of the things I was doing, was painting people's houses as part of that work. And as you know, if you've done some work on painting your own house or whatever, the chore at the end of the day is cleaning up the brushes, cleaning up the roller, and even the paint roller tray. Now the tip I'm going to give you here doesn't really apply to a paint roller tray. You're still stuck with cleaning that up at the end of the day. But if you're carrying on the next day with the same colour, you know, you might be painting rooms or painting models, you don't necessarily have to clean up the brush, and you don't have to clean up the roller. And the reason you don't have to do that is because if you use this simple cling film, your everyday kitchen cling film, all you have to do is, at the end of the day when you're finished, is wrap up your roller tightly in cling film, seal it all up, and the same applies to your brush. Now I can show you an example here of wrapping up a brush, so we'll just move over to the workbench and we'll have a look at that. You know folks, so I've just got myself roughly a square of cling film here. I lay the brush on it. Now this brush could be full of paint. Actually, if it is wet with paint, it's even better. And then we just pull the cling film over the top of the brush as well, and then over like that, wrap it up so that it seals. And I like to give it a bit of a twist around the handle on the brush as well. And there you have it. Now folks, when a brush is wrapped up like that, or even a roller in cling film with paint still on it, not only will it stay damp overnight, you'll get a few weeks out of this. I've gone up to a few weeks with the paint wrapped up in cling wrap, and same with the roller. So it's not necessary to clean it out every single day once you've finished the job, provided you're going on with the same colour. So that saves you a bit of time. Now this same thing applies to artists' acrylic paints if you're doing a model. Now if you need to make up a good sized batch of paint because you're doing a rather large job on your model, maybe painting retaining walls or whatever, if you don't use it on the day, it'll dry up and go hard on you, and then you've got to try and mix up the same sort of batch again. Well, what you can do is, if you use these, you know, these little trays you get in packets of biscuits, little clear plastic trays, use one of those to make your batch of paint up in, and make a good batch, probably enough to do the whole job. And at the end of the day, when you're finished, you can certainly wrap it up in cling film, but I've found these sandwich bags are really good. Now they're the Ziploc sandwich bag. It seals the bag when you pull that thing over. So you put your paint in there, your little container of paint in there, you seal the bag up, and to even give it even more life, a longer life, put it in the fridge. And I don't understand why it works. All I know is that it does work. So your paint, whilst it's in the tray, in the bag, sealed up in the fridge, is going to last you for days and days. Same with your brush. You know, it's not much trouble to wash out a modelling brush, but you could wrap up your brush as well. So that's the first tip for today. Okay folks, my next tip for the day is cutting brick paper or any sort of modelling paper that you may have, and cutting it accurately. And you might think, well, yeah, I can cut it accurately. I just lay the ruler on it, line it up, and away we go. Good luck to you. But I have come up with a method which is borrowed from other people. It's pretty much a standard method, and again, this is aimed at people that are sort of new to the hobby. You folks that have been around for a while will know how to do this. So we'll have a look at that again on the bench, and I'll show you just how I go about it, and a way to get very accurate, consistent results. Okay folks, for this demo I'm not going to actually measure how many millimeters I want to take off this sheet. What I'll do is, because it's a brick sheet, I'll just measure courses of bricks, and in this case we'll just make it something simple like, say, 5. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is about there. Now the method I'm using here is tried and true. It's an old method. I'm using a pin. Now these are used for sewing, etc., and you can get them at $2 shops or even retail stores. You can get them all over the joint. So what I do is, first of all, put the pin in the paper, and we're using a cutting mat here, I should stress that. So we count our 5 courses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll put it in the mortar right there. Just enough to stick into the cutting mat. Now I'll do the same at the other end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll put it in there. Now we're right on the end of the print where the bricks are there. Now we've got our piece of paper there. Now if somebody says, hey honey, there's a cup of tea, you can get up and walk away and nothing will change. Now what we do then is bring a straight edge over to the pins. Now I use a steel straight edge for my work. I know some people like to use plastic rulers, but I'm dead set against them because I feel that you can cut into plastic ruler with the sharp blade that we're going to use. Now our blade is, our ruler is pushed up against the pins there, and now we've got a guide here for our blade, and I'm using one of these big suckers, a Stanley snap-off blade knife. And what we do is we'll hold the rule steady, take out the first pin, and then put the point of the blade into the hole that was made by that first pin, and you can push the ruler against it if you need to. In this case it didn't need to. Hold the ruler steady, take out the second pin, check the second hole against the blade. The ruler, I should say, the ruler did have to move over against that one slightly. Check the first one again. Right, now we're good to go. Now I usually stand up to do this, folks, because you can get good downward pressure on the rule, and just always try and use a new blade and just cut along the straight edge firmly to go through the paper. Might take a couple of passes, and there we have it. So you can replicate that time after time whether you use your ruler to measure the distance or whether you're measuring brick courses, you can always get an accurate cut that way. I find it much better than trying to do it by eye, because once you line up the rule against whatever you're trying to cut, the rule starts to block what you're looking at. So unless you've got extremely good eyes, and I don't, unless you've got extremely good eyes, it's not going to be as accurate as the pin method. So there you are. Right, the third idea for today, folks, is clamps for holding your modelling work. If you're building card buildings, or even using plastic card to build buildings, sometimes you need clamps to hold parts together while the glue is going off. Now, you don't have to go all fancy with your clamps. You just need something that's going to hold the parts together, and possibly you need a good handful of clamps to do the job. Now, one of the clamps that I originally started using was the simple clothes peg. Now, the way it is there is fine. It works extremely well. But if you take take the two bits of wood out from the spring and reverse the way that they are fitted in, you finish up with a clamp like this, where you can see the spring, the center of the spring is just sort of floating around in between the two of them there, but you've got this big flat surface area here that you can use as a clamp. So there's the original, and there's the one at the back that's reversed. So that's very good. And how much is a packet of clothes pegs? You know, so you can make a whole heap of clamps that way, and you can vary how much surface area or what angle you use on the peg by sliding the spring further up towards the front there. That changes the ball game slightly. If you move it back, you get a different sort of angle on the peg. But anyway, just have a play around with that. Now, if you don't fancy mucking around with clothes pegs, you can get these tiny little bulldog clips for practically nothing. You know, you get a whole pack of them for a few bucks, and there's also a larger size like that. You can see the two, hang on, I'll hold that properly, two different ones there, and these are very inexpensive, and you can get quite a good deal of pressure out of these things, much more pressure than the clothes peg if you need a considerable amount of pressure. I found with the little ones though, if you open them up too wide, some of them actually, I guess you're stretching the metal a bit too much. So the best operating thickness for them is probably around about there. Once you open them out to here and do it for extended periods, it can damage the metal. But they're cheap anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Or you could go for the bigger ones like this, and you know the sizes keep increasing, so you can get big suckers as well. So they're just handy, simple little items that might be useful for model making. Yeah, so there we are. So that's my third and last handy hint for this week. Well folks, I hope you enjoyed that. You never know when some of these things might come in handy. I mean, some of you old hands already know some of this stuff, but this is particularly aimed at anyone that's fairly new to the hobby. So I hope you've got something out of that. Anyway, all the best. I'll see you next week. Cheers. Gormo.